Okay, welcome everyone. Last day of the conference, sad face, right? So thank you for coming. Today's session is Where Do We Go From Here by Karin Hostetter. COVID was an interesting challenge to environmental education and interpretation programs. It forced us to be creative, to come up with new approaches, to reach out to audiences in new ways. What did we learn that will continue into the future of successful organizations? Karin Hostetter is the Executive Director of COPE Environmental Center. She is a master trainer with the National Association of Interpretation and has served at that organization in many capacities over her career. With a degree in outdoor education and over 40 years in interpretation, Karin has worked at natural history museums, nature preserves, living history museums, zoos, and nature centers. Take it away, Karin. Thank you.
Great. You can see, I guess.
Yes, you can do that, yes.
I'm short on introductions. I'm not somebody who likes to say, and this is all the things I've done. So that gives you the bare, that's what I basically am about that might matter to you. And I was actually kind of asked to think about this for this conference and think about where we're interpretation and environmental ed going in the future after the pandemic. And one of the things that interests me in this is that how many times have you said or have you heard, I can't wait until things get back to normal and we can do what we were doing before. You hear that all the time. And my concern about that statement is what that means for most people is I can't wait until I can pull out the programs I was doing before. I can do them face to face. I can do, I can give the same kind of tour on the grounds or whatever that I was doing before the pandemic. And the reality of all that is we're not going to have that again. And it's a really hard thing to maybe admit to or to think, that's just what we want. We want that comfort zone, and it's not going to be there. So many things have changed and happened with our visitors and the way we interact with them that there has to be changes. We'll be able to bring those programs back, but if that's the only thing we're doing, then we're not going to succeed going into the future. And so for me, a bunch of it is that mindset of embrace those things that really work, but you need to be also open to changing in the way that our world and our visitors have changed over the time of the pandemic. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, but I don't. I can't predict the future. So I talked to a couple of different people and organizations to see what their thoughts were on some things. I have sent emails and had conversations with other directors within the Association of Nature Center Administrators, and there's a group of trainers that have an online group with the National Association for Interpretation. And I talked to somebody that I know in Colorado State Parks who did also a similar thing with their organization on kind of the future and how the pandemic had changed what they were going to be doing for. Yeah, so what I did from what I got from those three or four sources is there were like 3 or 4 things that they all kind of said, and those are the ones I'm going to present to you. And then at the end, we'll be able to go back and say, well, what do you think maybe within your organization and what you talked about, or what do you think are maybe even more specific things, trends or things that you've noticed. So again, this is a culmination of input from a few other people. I wish I had that crystal ball. So the first thing I want you to do is you go to the next slide. And I've got some questions there, and I want you to reflect on these and jot some things down so that they're in your mind, because we're going to come back to them a little bit here as we go through our talk. What is something that you had to give up, and that it was like, well, this is the core, this is what our programming was about, this is who we were, but you couldn't do it during the pandemic? And then what is something that you said, we did it, but we adapted it. We made this tweak to it, and we were able to continue it on. What is something that you created new because of the pandemic? Something that you had never done before and you did it because you needed to, or because you had new avenues of doing it? And then what is something that just surprised you out of all of this? You went, whoa, I never thought about this in terms of our organization. I want you to take a minute and answer those.
We just had somebody come into the room, just to let you know.
Thank
Hi, Carol.
you. So for the person who just came in virtually, there's some questions up there that we just have another minute or so left there. I've asked people to answer those questions for yourself and your organization, and then we'll kind of refer to those as we go along. Okay, you can still add to those as you think of things, but we can go to the next slide. And the pandemic was not all bad. Despite, I mean, there are a lot of things we don't like about it, but in terms of our organizations, it wasn't all bad. There are a lot of things that if we, after we got, what happened is we had to be so reactionary that it took us a while to be able to step back and then use the time that the pandemic gave us. And it did give us time if we were able to use it. We had to step back. We had to look at what was really important to us. What were the most important programs we did? What was the most important way that we interact with people that come to our site or use our facilities? How do we identify those things and really figure out who we are and what's important? Over time, we tend to just kind of add things. Some of them aren't that important. They're just, but we could do this, and so we do. And now we had a chance to step back and look at it. It forced us to be creative in a little bit different way and to step out of some comfort zones, but to really think and try new things. So when I ask you about new things you did, how many of you figured out a way to do some kind of program virtually that you hadn't done before? We had to, right? Now, did you feel like you were, and especially initially, were you as successful with it as you wanted to be? No, I immediately got a no back here in the back. No, we weren't either. Did you improve on it as time went? Yeah. Some people did, some didn't. That's all right. It totally was. The whole thing is that it forced you. Would you have done it if there hadn't been a pandemic? Yeah, that's the big one. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have even tried it because it wasn't the way you'd been doing business. And so this forcing you to be creative was, I think, a really positive big step of what that gave to us. The other thing, if you took the time to do it, is it allowed you to reevaluate what you were doing because you had, in most cases, more time without visitors, whether that's school groups and residents or school groups or just people coming in. You had a period of pretty much 12 months where you did not have people coming through your doors. You might have been using your facilities in another way, but they weren't coming in and using your manpower in programming. If you had taken it and grasped it, you had a time to really sit down and look at your mission, look at your programming, decide what was for, go back and fine tune. How many times do we say and said, I wish I just had time to go back to this program and update some materials or change a few activities? We say that all the time. The pandemic gave us an opportunity to do that. Now, a lot of us didn't, or it was after that. I would enter the pandemic a whole lot differently now, knowing what I know, than I did at the time. I also made my move to the Cope Environmental Center a year ago, June. So right at the height of the pandemic, I moved into a building, into a program, an organization. I didn't know their programming. There was nobody in the building. I worked in an office all by myself because everybody else, they finally took turns coming in one day a week so I could meet them. And there'd be two of us in the building. But even so, I feel like I wasted some time because, again, I was in a little bit different situation. But I've been thinking all along, how nice, boy, this would be so great to be able to sit down and really redo some things, recraft, improve. Maybe there's a program that you really have been wanting to do, you now have time to do it. We didn't all grasp that time, but it's a positive piece of the pandemic. And I think there may still be, depending on what happens more as we go further into fall, there may be still more opportunities to keep that in mind and grab that little spaces here and there where the pandemic, we've had schools shut down again for the variant for a period of time. So that opened up, maybe it was only 2 weeks of programming time that it opened up. But if we could grab it and be prepared for it, then you can use it as a house cleaning and refocusing and updating period of time. So there were positives, and there's some others in other ways, but for organizations and programming, so that were some positives. So the next thing then is to think about, like I said, I went to these different organizations and there were some things that I tried to say, what is it? What do you all think? And I put them together as to what the future is going to bring for us. So I don't know, all these organizations have a little bit different things that you offer to the public and don't. Some residence programs, and I don't know what everybody's from here. And you're a school, what are you? State parks. Do you allow the public onto your, okay, how about you? Okay, this won't apply to you as much, but. And the zoo, okay. But did you shut down for a while too, right? Yeah. So this first one won't necessarily apply to the two of you, but for the rest of us, our visitation throughout outdoor parks across the country skyrocketed, right? National parks, state parks, county parks, we have trails that are open on our environment. It's skyrocketed. And that we have to thank the government for that. Because the government said, here's something you can do, go outside, go to a park, go to an open space, take a walk, take a hike, do that because you can and it's safe to do it. And they didn't have anything else to do. They're at home all day, cooped up with the kids, sick of working at their computer. Yeah, let's go outside. So that skyrocketed. We had cars in our parking lot every single day. Even though I was the only one in the building, the parking lot had lots of people in it. Well, now, as people are going back to work, they're starting to see that we still have more than before the pandemic, but not as many as during the height of it. They're starting to get back to their regular routines. They're starting to get back to the kids have sports again when they're running around to that kind of thing. But when they have a moment, they still think right now about, let's go take a hike together. They still think about that. So the question becomes, how can we capitalize on the places where people were interacting with us before? So if it's on the trails, how can we capitalize on that? Are there ways that you can, because they're still not going to necessarily come to a program if they weren't before, because that's not how they related to what they were doing. Right? So how can you use your site to connect and get more of your messages, your education, whatever that is, out to the people who still are coming to use your trails? So we have, we have kiosks, and most people do at the beginning at trailheads, right? That say what? They say the rules of the trail. This is when we're open. This is what you can do with your dog. You can't have fires. You can't ride your bicycle. You know, it has all of the rules. Is there a way that you can capitalize and donate a little space there to something educational? Can you have a look for this blooming right now? They're not going to stop and read. It's not like you're going to give them a whole lecture. But look for this blooming. Listen for this. Some fun tidbit, unknown, wow fact about something, a species that's there in your plant, any kind of animal, plant that's out there. Give them a wow fact that they can take in, grab quickly and walk off with. How can you capitalize on those kiosks? Now, when I say that, it becomes an ongoing management program. If you put one thing up there, and I talk about this spring, look for this spring wildflower blooming, and it's blooming when I put it up there, and I don't go back for 3 months. Okay, that's not blooming anymore. And I, as the visitor, said, oh, well, I don't need to read this anymore because it's not relevant to me. It's not relevant. So if you want to do, it's a great way to reach people, but you do need to have a way to every couple of weeks update it and make it current. But you can stick a little message out there, relate to the people who are coming to still use your trails, since that's how they got connected to you in the first place. Another thing that we'll come back to in just a second, but you might be able to find a new place on a trail where you haven't had a sign in the past, that you could put one that is a changing what's happening or look for, or wow, that's scattered. I'm not saying go out and put signs everywhere. I like to be able to enjoy a trail without signs, but you might be able to find another place other than just trailheads. Maybe there's an intersection of several trails where someone would get. Think about how you can use what, your interactions on trails with people. Whether or not we like it, virtual's here to stay. And the opportunities are enormous. And you've seen a couple of things in just your 2 days here. Look at the I don't know how many, I think that the note said there were 10 people registered for the virtual. And every session I've been in, there's been somebody in that session. And I don't, whoever's on it with us today,
Here.
I don't know if you can type in there. I would say that she couldn't come, or she would have probably, but it has made education and professional development so much more accessible to people. And so we've got that. You heard if you were at the awards last night, the students who said, this is what we're planning, this is what we want in our conference next year. They had a theme going that to embrace technology rather than use it as a barrier. They wanted to put some stuff out there that embrace technology. So the virtual is here to stay. We'll do the next slide. That's all right. We can chat too.
Right.
Well, we can chat with her.
There you go.
One of the things it does is it reaches a wider range of audiences. If you think about it and can put it together well, there are a whole bunch of people we can reach now that we couldn't reach before. It's a great way to reach those who are homebound. There are a lot of people who just can't come because they can't get out. They can't walk a trail. They can't manage the car, and or they depend on somebody else. So you have a way to reach people that are homebound. You have a way to reach people who are far away from you. And I could say urban, but since a lot of us, not all of us, are in an urban place. But even though I'm in a teeny tiny town, there are teeny tiny towns even further beyond me that aren't making those people and those schools aren't making the trip to our center. And so you can reach people. I moved to Eastern Indiana from Denver, Colorado. All right. And in Denver, there's always, how can we get our programs, whether it was the museum or the zoo, was how can we get our programs to the mountains? Because they can't, it's too long a drive for them to make it down to take advantage of these. And so it was always, but the cost and all of this, it costs too much to have a van. You have to have staff people. You have to plan things for 2 weeks at a time, and staff to drive the van, and scheduling and hotels and rooms. Virtual takes that out of the issue. You can reach those more urban places with your programming through Zoom or any of the other platforms. You also can go not just through a wider range of audiences. I was going to say, what Carol said is that more involvement. That's one of my next ones too. So we'll come right back to what Carol just said. Is that, well, actually, go ahead to the next one. Yeah, greater participation. So there's a lot more people when they're there. They can be more. They can come, they can make it. We found for meetings, we have probably for our board meetings like 98% attendance rate compared to 50%, 60% before when they had to come. They can do it from their office. They don't have to have the travel time. If they're out of town, I have a board that does a lot of travel. They're retired and wealthy and they travel. They can do it and they're willing to. they'll attend a Zoom meeting. They're willing to put an hour in their travel time to attend a board meeting or committee meeting. They're not willing to stay home. Okay, so that was one that allows participation. It's also been found in another little funny way about in participating is that on Zoom or any platform, I'm sorry, like we were just saying before you folks came in, we began to use Zoom as just a word, no matter what platform we're using. It's like Kleenex is a word. Zoom is becoming a word, and I don't necessarily mean that Zoom platform, but that process. That I forget what I was going to say. I don't know. It'll come back. I don't remember what I was in my mind, where my mind was headed there. Oh, I know it was. Is that in those kinds of platforms, people who are introverts are more likely to participate because they're comfortable entering information into the chat, and it allows them to have a lot of introverts need more processing time before they really, before they put themselves out there. They want to make sure what they're ready to do and say is really what they want to, and they're not as willing to interrupt to get something said, but they're much more willing to participate through a chat. And so any of those forms allows participation in that way as well. I wanted to attend, or I've purchased sort of I signed up for something I knew I couldn't attend because I wanted recording, which was also kind of this participation in reaching bigger audiences and going to different places for how to use WhatsApp in order to reach different audiences. And I haven't yet listened to it, but if you're not familiar, that's a very common international app for communicating with people. And so it was how to use that. And I'm like, oh, I've used WhatsApp when I traveled, and I still connect with the people in those foreign countries through WhatsApp. So that'd be kind of a cool thing to know something about. So the virtuals here, go to the next one. So virtual's here to stay, no matter what you think. And I honestly, very truly believe that no matter what size you are, if you're really going to survive in 3 or 5 years and grow, it's because you're also embracing, you're able to do both, to do face-to-face and virtual education. It's going to take both. The other thing that it does, which I thought of after I put this together, is the virtual kind of equalizes the playing field. The ones because you don't have to have, you've seen here, there's not a whole lot of money invested in putting this together. If you did it yourself at your site, a lot of them were done with, your camera, hold your camera, put it on it, do your program. I've also seen places invested in huge studios that had all these zoom in things so they could do, show microscopic. But a lot of them say we don't use that very often. We use just the regular camera. So you can do so much with it, with what you bought. And it levels that playing field. It puts everybody out on the same equality. It doesn't matter what size you are, whether you're in a big city, how much money you're making in. It puts you up there with the big players if you just embrace it a little bit. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about was that came across is that experiences are still important. People are still looking for these unique experiences. And I want to step back here and give you a quick economics lesson here. And I want you to think, we've been through several phases of economies in our history. And I want you to think about a birthday party. I like a birthday party. Well, some of us are old enough when we don't like our birthday parties, but we've all experienced in some way or another a birthday party. So in the very, very early, we're here at Spring Mill, we can talk about, in the mill time and even there, if you were having a family and you're having a birthday party, what did you have to do to have that party, have a birthday cake? What did you have to do? Yeah, you had to bake it. What did you even have to do before you baked it? You had to mill the flour. As I said, we're here. We can mill the flour, buy the sugar. What else? Raise the chickens, get the eggs,
Milk the cow.
milk the cow, exactly. So we were in an agricultural economy then, and we had to do all of those pieces. The next economy was the industrial economy. And we came out with what came next. When you wanted to make a birthday cake, you might even still do it. You went and got a box. So the industrial economy allowed factories and things to be pre-done and put together. An interesting note on this is that the original birthday cake box or cake boxes, cake mixes, literally had everything in it. You just added water. Women who were homemakers complained that they no longer felt like they were making the cake. And so they took out the egg and the oil. And so now you add those so that you can feel that homemakers, women could feel they made the cake. I think that's a funny little piece to the history of cake making. All right, so that was our industrial economy. We've moved up to making a cake or having a birthday cake late after, boxes, moving forward a little bit in time. What might you do even now for a birthday?
Order it by bakery.
Just go order it. You can go fancy and go to a bakery, or you can go into Myers or right, any of Kroger's and just order it, right? And have it done for you. So that was our service economy. We asked people to do it for us. Then what became very popular with especially kids' birthday parties was what? You had a cake, and what else did you have? Entertainment. You had everything else that went with it. You might have had it at a place. I'm not yet familiar with what places are around here. I can say Chuck E. Cheese's or some places that I know of in Colorado. But you go to a place, or you had it at your house, but you brought in, you had it themed, and you had gift bags for people, and you had games for the kids, and you
Bouncy house
and a bouncy house or a clown. You hired a clown, things like that, and it was this experience economy. And we are in the experience economy now, which is what brings me to the experiences are still important. We are also, to finish the picture and to add to the experiences, we are also moving into what's being called the shared economy. There have been a couple of different names for the current economy, but shared is one of the ones. And that one for me is one that I see a lot, so it's easy for me to grab hold of. And what are some things that you can think of that we have in business in our lives that are shared? Can you think of any of the things that might have fallen into a shared economy? Ride sharing, yep. Bike sharing, car sharing, those things where you go and you just have to check it out and use it and put it back. Exactly. Internet access, yeah. Yep. I would even say, I hadn't thought of this before, but I would even say it's not always the way they want it to work, but some of the TV subscription, like Netflix and stuff like that, where you can have more than one, and phone plans where you can have all your family. It doesn't matter if you live in the same place or not. As long as your family, you can have them on the same plan. So we have all kinds of things that we share. And so what we're in, right? So if you had a shared birthday cake or birthday experience, that would be several, and they do this, several families will go together for their kids who have birthdays in, like maybe in the same month, and they'll do one a little more extravagant birthday, because they were probably inviting all of those kids to the party, each other's party anyway. So they do it together and have it an experience, right? But they share that thing together. I like this. No, you don't have to rent space, right? So it's cheaper sometimes to do Zoom. Yeah. Scheduling is easier. Okay. So experiences are still going to be what's so important to people when they're at your site. And how can you create experiences for them that don't necessarily have to have you there to do it? We can reach a lot more people if it doesn't rely on a one-to-one. I totally believe that the experience is richer if we can do one-on-one or one-on small group, not knocking that at all. But the number of people that I can get to in a week, one-on-one or one-on, 2 or 3 is a whole lot less than the number that I can try to get to at that kiosk or at some point on the trail. So how can I take that, and this is where I was saying we kind of go back to the meeting people on the trail. How can I go back to that and create experiences on the trails? And there's a couple of things. I tried to pull some slides off of another person's, I had permission off, and I wasn't successful at pulling her slides in their format and putting them into this. But I'm going to tell you, they had done some work in the national parks. A lot of times we can look at national parks for leadership and ideas and things that we can try. And what this was coming up with are things we totally can do. And that was creating little experiences at various places on their property, so along our trails, that people could do. And some of the things that I saw, one was that she had pictures of. One was a typewriter mounted, fastened to a table, where you sat down as an old-fashioned regular type on the typewriter kind of thing, and you sat and you just typed your impressions, your feelings, or whatever of that moment. It was on the edge of the canyon, so you could take that, you could type it, you could take it with you. So there's an experience. It didn't cost them very much at all. Another one that was at a park was a bench, and this was at Grand Canyon, and there were several jars, and the sign said, there were 2 signs. One sign said, which is the most dangerous aspect to the park? And the other one said, vote with rocks. And there were jars fastened to the bench, and on each jar had things that were threats. They were all threats. It was people and climate change and fire, and so various things that really were threats out there. And then people just put rocks in and voted. Again, they create, and it was educational because they were all threats. So they learned it. It was done without a one-on-one thing, and it was an experience, a simple experience, because they were involved and engaged in casting their vote. So these are the kinds of experiences to try to think about, can you put out there. Another one is a little bit different. I don't know which park this is at. It's a big chair painted red. Those big ones made out of this that are, you see them in city parks. That's where I often see them. That have the armrests, and there's big, huge ones. And it was looking out over a vista. And so you could sit there and I suppose have your picture taken or something, or just have, it was a little more an experience, because it wasn't just a picnic bench or a regular bench. It was this big bright red chair. But so things like that. So experiences are still important. We're still in an experience economy, but we need to think about how can we make or create experiences for people. All right. So I think you go to the next one. So this is when I want to turn it over. So that doesn't seem like many things. I mean, all these people I talked to all agreed on. But if you think about what they were, again, just to recap them, it was people came for your trails and the outdoor experience. That's what got them there. How can you connect to them? Virtual is here to stay. And what are some of the advantages? And how can you start to implement, if you didn't, how can you start doing virtual? If you did do virtual, how can you grow on it and improve it? And where can you use it that you still haven't been thinking about it? We took our live animal encounters and turned them into Wild Wednesdays and videotaped every Wednesday, a little 2-minute thing with our program person, and it wasn't always even a critter. We did something each week. We did making snow, backyard, home snow from the snow, home ice cream from the snow. We did leaf collecting. So we did things that were seasonal, and they were just, every week we had a new one up there. And I happen to know it's come back. There have been people have come in we did it for that first winter, and then we stopped over the summer because we had enough things that were happening and working on, and then we did it for the next winter. And I've had people come back and say, we've still got our worm composting going. And they got it from, what we put in a 2 or 3 minute video, but they still had it going. Well, pretty good. The fact that you tried it's pretty good. You know, that was more one of the more ambitious ones on there. So so that, and then making sure that we're still providing experiences for people. So those are the things that were kind of universal. And what I want to turn over to you now are what are some other things? Well, first was what's something that you tried, and you can just bring this up as we go on conversation, that it was new for you and you want to try. And then what are things that you think from your point of view at your places, what are you thinking of things that need to be, that are going to be different and carried forward post-pandemic? I don't even know when post-pandemic is, so we don't even know what that is, right? But it's not post-pandemic, we're kind of in between right now. We still have to worry about it this winter, and we'll see what happens as spring comes next year, whether we're really on the downside or whether we're still in this kind of in-between space. But what are things that now that you think you're going to want to carry on or do differently than you were doing before?
Well, I work at a very young state court, and it was the year before the pandemic. We were looking at where our visitors were spending the most amount of time, which is a parking lot that will be developed eventually, where there'll be a nature center and outdoor displays and things, but that hasn't happened yet. So one of our seasonals thought, oh, we should just take our pop-up tent and go sit on the trail and catch people as they complete that little activity. So we started doing, we call them pop-up programs. And those were really popular for us through the pandemic. We would have like self-contained craft activities based off of an animal or a topic at the park. If it was an animal, it'd be like a frog hopper craft, and we bring out our frog, and we could accommodate a few people up at the table, like in family groups or social distance, under our little pop-up, and then they could go to a picnic table and work on their craft. And then we could have a new family step up and do it with us. That was really, really successful for us. It was something different that we kind of tried to go through at a pandemic, and then we just carried on, and it's something I think will continue.
Good. And that does, again, two of the things that were in that list of 3. It's an experience for them, and it takes place along a trail. So it totally incorporates us to aspects that are going to continue forward.
For instance, an art teacher is a 4-part, 5-part series. So we would go out to different places in Indianapolis, natural spaces, and I would do a brief lesson on space, and then she would lead art lesson. Either put together kits or for people who were looking at these even further away, just a list of things they needed for the art activity. And we have discussed, we haven't moved forward on it, but essentially turning that into an in-person activity, kind of like a wine and canvas sort of thing, but take students on hikes and somewhere halfway through stop and do that art activity. But it still has that opportunity to have the
Yep. A lot of times to have the virtual option, it's super simple. It's doing the program you're already doing and just videoing it and posting it either as into your Facebook, into your website, or your own YouTube channel, whatever way of social media you want to use. But that's perfect. I mean, that's kind of what we did with those animal ones and expand a little bit. But again, it's a way to put it out there, and then you can reach the bigger audience. And you can start to put it in your PR information, your marketing information, that this is available, and people that don't have to be there to get it. Yeah.
One of the things that we did was they were sending out like a weekly at-home activity sheet, and we have teacher and educator resources on our website, but it went out to all members automatically, and we posted about it on our social media page, so anyone can sign up for these emails. And so they picked an animal, or they picked a We were able to add a conservation message in there, so it was a little mix between the education department and PR. And I really think that that's something that we should utilize more. Because we have so many families that said, no, that would come out and then I'll show you what we learn more about that topic or that animal throughout the rest of that week. And if we can get that kind of engagement on the outside, then you have a little bit more captive audience. We could expand from that, you know, then you can have. So talk about.
Yeah, the virtual is a great way to allow your members and just anybody to have conversations with, like you said, keepers, behind the scenes tours that you don't normally allow. We did conversations with the director, so I did a couple of just did 2 or 3 of them, but we scheduled them out and posted them so people could have a time to talk. It was through Zoom. We sent them a link and we had a conversation. Because they, you know, they sometimes they just want to see that the director, they don't see them normally. Does the director have a face? Does, you know, does the director, can the doctor speak? Are they around, you know, things like, so it was through Zoom, but it was a way to interact with the, you know, higher administrative level. And we did them over lunch so that, you know, they were just lunch chats with the
One thing I noticed in group class, since I had to adapt labs somewhat unsuccessfully, I felt, to an online setting, though, was, you know, I think there's this sense that nature is something that you have to go someplace else to experience. And so one of the things that I really tried to do was get my students just exploring their own backyards. And some of the responses that I got, were, you know, really insightful. Some of the things that the students posted pictures of and wrote about. I think continuing to hone that message and emphasize that message. But
when I said that one of the things the pandemic allowed us to do is to kind of reflect and find out figure out what was important and things that I think that's a good exercise. A lot of organizations I know think that their goal, their purpose is to get people out to their site. And I think that's nice. And I think it is probably, we have more support, we have fun, we can show numbers, we can, you know, justify people and things like that if people are coming out. But sometimes I do wonder if that's really should be our ultimate goal, or should it be exactly what you're saying, is just to get people to go outside, care what's right around them, and then use that as a way that they then give us support. Maybe it's financial instead. Maybe they come to a program, but once a year and they weren't coming at all, something like that. I worked a lot with inner city students, and they totally believe that the outdoors is somewhere else that they'll never go. They do not see the wild or nature or anything like that as the vacant lot or the potted plant on a porch. You know, and so totally trying to get them to understand that. They see every single bug that's around as something you should squash or torment. You know, trying to get them to understand. And we would do field trips in the city so that they could say, oh, look at all that's living in this crack. Look at all that's living in this little vacant strip right here, or in this median where they planted a tree. Let's look at everything on the tree. So yes, using this as an opportunity to have people through the activities or the questions or something like that you have people do, but to do it in their own space. Capturing those too is if they're writing something or responding to you, capturing those and keeping them in a place that other people can come back to and see and have a running record of comments from people. That's really powerful because they say some really amazing things. And they show to others the absolute mystery and magic of what is right around them. you're thinking that have been conversations at your place or things that you. So just again, from our place, we can do very much. I tried really hard to get some virtual programming to happen. Again, it was a little difficult because I didn't have staff, they didn't have any skill in it. But I plan to continue to try to do that because I think I can reach and get our message. We focus very highly, just have a huge focus on sustainable living. And I can put together some programming that is virtual that reaches out to a whole lot larger audience on making sustainable living choices. That's what I, like I said, that's what I had to share. You know what those three organizations had in common with where the future goes. We don't know what it will be. We never know. I don't have that crystal ball. But I hope that you'll think about these three things, choose one, think about something that you can do that's going to embrace the things that were positive from the pandemic and that we did learn and are continuing to learn, and can take those forward. Anything else from our
Yes.
Zoom, our virtual
Yeah.
participants?
Yep.
Beyond geographic boundaries. Yep. That's something that's just so powerful. And we have not begun to embrace the power. We just aren't, of using this virtual world to break geographic boundaries. And when we talk about all of the Jedi work that needs to be done, that's another thing that this helps. This virtual format helps that because it brings people, it can bring people from so many different perspectives and places into, again, a more equalizing and common space to have conversations and experiences. Thank you, Carol, for joining us today. Yep, opening up that understanding, having those conversations. All right, thank you for coming. I think I have now an extra few minutes to do your packing and getting out of your room.